Hello everyone, and welcome back to Alpenglow. This is episode number 8, and today we're building the town of Cardston, which I mentioned last episode. This is really the oldest settlement in the region. Downtown Alpenglow itself, which we built in the first episode, is a lot bigger, and it's now the main center of the city. But historically, this place, Cardston, was the original settlement, and it sprung up as a mining town, I imagine. And now it's just a secondary city center that serves people that are living in the southwest area of the city. And that's pretty much this whole area we've been working on the last couple episodes, and this episode, and then we'll be finishing that off next time. But for now, we're building this main area. So we're starting off with this road system, which is just a pretty simple grid with one-way streets to make traffic flow a little bit more smoothly. And they've been adding things in like that curve there, and just where it kind of butts up against the highway. They've been altering and changing the road system to their needs as the town grows. Originally it was pretty small. It was probably just like, 4 or 5 blocks right in the center. And now you can see all those like cul-de-sacs and dead ends. Those are just things where it's been altered to fit in larger developments, or just to make the road system a little more useful for modern traffic patterns. And we also have a mixture of older buildings that were probably originally built there in the 19th century when the city was founded, and also some newer ones that have replaced older developments. And I wanted it to be not like the worst place to live, but also not exactly like a booming town or anything. Like, there's some more modern developments and amenities, but for the most part, a lot of this town hasn't changed drastically since like the late 19th century, early 20th century. So we have some of these older, nice wall-to-wall buildings and a couple office buildings mixed in. And you might see up to the top right now, bottom left, okay, now it's gone. But there's basically one bulky office building there, a couple parking garages, and then there's just a little transit center in there, which we'll be working on, which has both the blue and the orange light rail line, which I mentioned before, and also a bus station where all the bus routes in this region are going to link up to one another. And then we just have a very, very simple sky bridge system here, which I have this very limited set of assets to work with for this series. So we're just using the vanilla pedestrian crossing, which is, it looks fine, but it's not covered, which kind of defeats the point of having a sky bridge in a cold climate in the first place. But we'll just have to deal with it, I guess. And the extent of the high-rise and mid-rise and these, 3 or 4 story building developments is pretty much just a couple blocks out from that main intersection. And the rest of it is going to be filled in with all this awesome low-density sprawl that we've been doing for this series. And that's really kind of one of the main themes I wanted to go with this city, is just having vast tracts of suburban-style development with these low-density buildings. And we've been using Boldly Building's American Eclectic theme for that, which is such a great build theme for this style of city, of course, which we're going to start zoning right now. So I'm going to let you watch me do that, and I'll be back in under a minute. See you then. Alright, welcome back. So I figured that a town of this size would probably have its own high school, so I wanted to just go with a very simple build here with this very nice high school asset, which is sort of obscured by all the snow on top of it, but I think the general shape still really works for this type of build. And then we're running a school bus line through the surrounding neighborhoods. And once I do that, you can go in and actually just change the bus model that it sends out to be a school bus model from the workshop, which is pretty cool. So I've been doing that all over the city. I think this is the only time I show it, but I just thought I'd mention it while I'm doing that. And now we're moving on to filling some of these little gaps and creating some new neighborhoods. We're starting off with this kind of weird little triangular area that's next to this main arterial road that we made last episode. And I've been thinking, like, as we move outward from this town center and also from Alpenglow, the roads are going to be newer and newer, and so they're not going to be as, like, disrupted by these new freeways and large arterial roads. So they get a little bit more broken up, a little bit less grid-like, and they just feel more like they've been fit in next to these big roads as opposed to being disrupted by them getting put in there. And you can see that little tram loop there, or light rail loop at the end of what is eventually the blue line, I think. And I was thinking that's sort of like they were planning on extending that all the way from Cardston down to the airport, which is to the south of here, below screen. But I figured they didn't have the funds or they couldn't get the proper right of way to do that. So it just terminates there, and they're thinking, maybe eventually they'll be able to send that all the way to the airport, because for now there's only bus transport to the airport. And now we're building a new neighborhood here, and what I wanted to go with this road layout is basically working with the road hierarchy that we have here with this big 4-lane road that runs south of Cardston, and those two bigger roads that run north and south. And I wanted to make it so that these actual neighborhood roads can't really be efficiently used to like drive through the neighborhood and take shortcuts. So there are different entrances that don't really lead directly toward exits. So it's really only used by locals going to and from their houses. And again, as we move outward from the town centers, we start adding in some more green spaces and non-zoned areas. At least in this neighborhood in particular, we fill it in with some trees and some walkable paths, just as a way to get these people some green space instead of being completely packed in with all these buildings. And I figured that was definitely a step up from just having buildings tightly packed and not having any place that you could walk to actually access that sort of park. And here you can see a nice overview of what we've done so far. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in another few gaps like that. I'll let you watch that and I'll be back in just a minute. Hope you enjoy the segment. Welcome back. So we're moving on from the area immediately surrounding Cardston, and we're going to lay down some of the final roads for this part of the map at least. And these are getting to be like the really spread out, larger property, almost suburban kind of areas. And so going with more twisty roads, and we're ramping up that idea of like, these are not places where people go if they don't live there. And we're also kind of using this as a transition to the edge of the map. As you can see there, we're right near the edge of the map here. And I didn't want to just build all the way up to the edge of the world, but I also wanted it to feel at least a little natural. So as I said, these places are way more spread out, and so there's more room for trees. And then as we get farther and farther away from the center of the city, the trees become denser and denser until you can't really tell where the suburbs end and where the forest begins. And that's just kind of what we're doing to transition from the actual city to the edge of the map. And now you may have noticed as I've been like zooming in and out that at the edge of the map you can see a whole bunch of zoned areas. And I did that for a couple of reasons. And the main reason is that we've been zoning so much residential that we have like no jobs available. So I just ended up zoning a bunch of office space at the edge. But I also zoned some residential. And so the second reason I have all those things out there is I figured it would generate some traffic in and out of like the main area of the city on the freeway. So in that sense, it's kind of serving as like maybe an actual suburb or another city where people commute to and from Alpenglow and Cardston. And that's just another thing to kind of create the illusion that the city is bigger than it is, because it's really not physically that big. We do get up to like 160,000 population, I think, with the realistic population mod, which is pretty good. But most of this map is mountains, so we actually don't fill up like a huge amount of space. But you'll see once we eventually get to the final cinematics for the series, it's a pretty decent chunk of land. I think it looks pretty cool. And again, as always, that's what I'm going for with this series, is like a realistic and nice looking city that fits into the landscape. And I think overall we're going in the right direction with that. And speaking of fitting things into the landscape, we're moving on to some of these hillside neighborhoods. I did quite a few of these off screen at some point. I'm not really sure why I didn't record footage of it, but we do have this one. And this is sort of just like taking these huge properties, very spaced out to the extreme. So we have these gravel roads running up and down the mountains with just a few in and out points, with some sparsely zoned low-density residential. And I imagine these are also roads that people would take to get to trailheads in the mountains, at least during the summer. So we're going to spend just another minute on this, and I'll see you on the other side of the segment. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, to finish off this episode, we're going to go back to this suburban area that I was mentioning before. I added a few more roads just to flesh it out. We're going for a look that it's basically like different subdivisions that have popped up with kind of their own unique road systems. There are grids, twisty parts, and here we're adding in a lake. And I figured this would probably be like one of the nicest places in town. This would be where all the big houses are around the lake. And there might be like a couple public access points or something, but mostly it's for private use. So we have this kind of nice, wealthy area. And I forgot how tedious it can be to get full coverage with your water pipes, because usually that's just something that I mod away so that I can focus on detailing. But again, for this series, it's intended to be a little bit light on mods. So we do go through and add these water and heating pipes. And it can be, it can be kind of fun to try to match it up with the roads. But overall, I definitely prefer not having to worry about that sort of thing. And now we're finally filling out this lake and seeing how it goes. There is that little shoreline on the south end of it. I suppose that would probably be the public access point that I was mentioning. And you can see I'm spacing out these zoned properties just to try to make it look like that these are big houses on big plots of land. And now we're running some power lines to this area, and this is one thing I actually do kind of enjoy managing, but mostly because of like the visual aspect of having power lines running through the city, which is I think that just adds a lot of realism that you don't really get in the vanilla game, as opposed to the water pipes, which are just completely hidden and don't really add anything to the look of the city. Okay, and now we're pretty much done with this episode. We're just going to let these finish growing. And then we're going to put down some trees in these two neighborhoods, which I've called Orion Glen is the one on the left here, and the other one is called Revali. So we're going to put some trees down. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Alpenglow, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one. Bye.